Hi, and welcome to the How to Survive Healthcare podcast. I'm your host, Kayla Thompson-Riviere, seasoned critical care RN turned independent patient advocate. Tune in every week so that you can learn the things about the U.S. healthcare system that no one ever tells you. That way that you can get the most from it and optimize your health outcomes. Now, of course, this podcast is strictly to inform and entertain and should never be taken as a substitute for medical advice. Let's dive right in. So I'm really happy to bring this topic to you today. I know this can be a very difficult topic and a very heavy one, and I felt that that's exactly the reason that I needed to bring it here so we can discuss some ways to help get past that difficulty and be able to have these conversations with our loved ones. So the do's and don'ts of death. I'm curious. You've probably planned yourself a vacation this year. You've probably planned a birthday party. Have you stopped and even begun any planning around your death? Like, if you're like most people, probably not. And that makes sense. It's not something we want to talk about. There naturally tends, especially in American culture, tends to be a lot of fear around death. And unfortunately, that means we just don't have the conversations about it. However, we know death is a natural part of life, right? It's one of the only things we can count on, the death and taxes. And we're all painfully aware of the taxes as we're in that season right now. And of course, death, we don't know when death will come. I think that's part of the reason it gets put off. We often assume, especially for the younger generations, that death isn't something we have to worry about. But sadly, as my experience over the years as an ER and critical care nurse has taught me, death does not pick an age, and it can strike at any time. So the best thing you can do for yourself is to be prepared. So I'd like to talk about some ways we can have these conversations with our families and promote really getting the kind of death that we want to have. So there's a program called the 5-Wish program. And I'll link it in the description below the video, or you can simply Google it, the 5-Wish program yourself. And it's a step-by-step framework to help guide you through a conversation around death. So the first two are legal aspects, and then the last three are more spiritual, emotional aspects. There's a lot of benefits of going through the 5-Wish framework, even for those who don't feel like they are close to death. A lot of times people who, again, especially particularly the young and the healthy, feel like this isn't something that pertains to them or it isn't something they need to do. But it's really interesting because going through death planning can actually give you a better outlook on your life and get more from life. So the first wish is, who should make decisions for me when I can't? And this is the legal documentation for this is your medical power of attorney. If you do not have one in place, then there is a framework for a default of who would become your medical decision maker. It varies state by state, but typically it's your spouse. If you're not married, it's your oldest child. If you don't have oldest adult child, and then if you don't have children, it kind of depends on who comes forward, and it can get a little messy. The issue with this is that just because somebody is your spouse or your oldest child does not mean that they're always equipped to follow your wishes and make decisions in the way that you would want them to, particularly if there's never been conversation about the kinds of things you would want in the first place. I've unfortunately seen many times where, especially in the ICU, there wasn't a lot of conversation with that decision maker, and the patient perhaps had some wishes written out, but the decision maker a lot of times isn't emotionally prepared to make some of the difficult decisions, and they can end up making decisions that go against perhaps the wishes of the patient. So this is why it's incredibly important who you do designate as your medical power of attorney. The second part of that is the living will. And the living will is the legal document that outlines the kind of care that you would like to receive in and around death. Most people who I've had conversation with relate that they want to have a peaceful death. They want, when it's their time, to let nature take its course. They don't want any heroic measures. They wouldn't want to be maintained on life support for an extended period of time. But unfortunately, a lot of these descriptions are kind of vague. Going through the 5-Wish program helps to puts questions and a lot of framework around these things. So, what does heroic measures mean for you? It can mean something completely different for you and for me. And the last thing we want to do is rest our death planning on assumptions. So again, having those conversations, getting them well documented legally, and choosing the right person to enforce them. Just going back to that, a lot of people are not aware that just because you have things documented in your living will, if you get to, when you get to the point you can't speak for yourself, your medical power of attorney, or if not appointed, whoever is legally becomes your decision maker, has unfortunately the right to revoke any and all of your wishes. And I've seen it more times than I can count. And it's so painful to watch somebody who clearly has spelled out that they don't want to be maintained on a ventilator. They don't want dialysis. They don't want feeding tubes. And then they never had the conversation with the family. And now the oldest child isn't ready to let go of mom, isn't ready to give up. And all of those wishes go out the window. And all of those things are done to that patient. And often ultimately in futility. So the patient still dies at the end, but the path at which they got there was nothing of what they had previously mentioned they wanted, because there was a lack of conversation and there wasn't an appropriate person designated as the medical power of attorney. So those two legal documents and the person you pick for that are incredibly powerful. They are included in the 5-Wish program. The 5 Wishes, it's a framework. It's also a paid program. So you can go, they have a paper version and an online version. And they have all of the requirements for every state. You just have to get it notarized. And it walks you through everything step by step to get that all legally done for you. However, the medical power of attorney and the living will are things that you can have done for free for the paperwork aspect, and then you will have to still pay for a notary. So I'll also in the video provide a link where you can access those resources for free if that's a concern for you. The last 3 parts of the 5-Wish program, again, as I mentioned, these more address your spiritual and emotional needs and are not legal documents. They're just related to your death planning. These things can be changed at any time without any further actions needing to be taken. If ever you're to choose to change your medical power of attorney or anything in your living will, it will have to be re-notarized, just as an FYI. So wish number 3 is, how comfortable do I want to be? Number 4 is, who should be involved in my care? And number 5 is, what are my spiritual and emotional needs? As I mentioned, if you go to the 5-Wish website, it'll walk you through lots of questions to sort all of this out. Some of the interesting things that were a bit of a surprise to me is it even pulls in like having conversations with people that perhaps there was some sort of a bad a falling out years ago. It calls attention to that, so you can have all of your spiritual and emotional needs settled before death comes. And they actually have some interesting stories of a somewhat younger person who decided to go through this and actually reached out and rectified a relationship, and now has rekindled such a strong relationship with somebody who they had hadn't been in contact with for years, all because that person took the steps to start thinking about death planning. So it's a lot more than just what funeral home do you want. um, Also speaking on this, like I said, will help you outline the level of comfort that you want. As I mentioned, a lot of people who I've spoken to over the years about death in my role as a nurse have mentioned that they want a peaceful death, but without, what does that mean? Again, a peaceful death may mean one thing to you and a totally different thing to me. So it goes step by step to help you really go through and get all of these things in place so that inevitably, when it does happen, you're prepared. When you are, quote unquote, on your deathbed, whether it's something that's anticipated or, a traumatic injury or accident, it's really not the time for any planning. And there's a good chance that you may not even have the mental or physical capacity to be involved in that planning. So now is the time. And I encourage you to step into the discomfort of death a little bit and start to think about what these things mean for you and or your family members. If you are hoping to bring this up with family member, I would, if you can, encourage them to watch this video. So perhaps we can help to shift their perspective on death. I know myself personally, I have a family member who just turned 87 and only recently has become open to the idea of talking about how to handle things around her death. And I'm so grateful that she has opened up to us at this point. And it for the longest time, it made me concerned that because she wouldn't share any of her wishes, she just really wouldn't talk about it because it is scary. I was afraid that we were going to be left to guess and ultimately not give her the kind of end of life experience that she would have wanted, which when you love somebody, really you want to be able to give them the passing that they want in the way that they want it. I think that that's one of the ultimate gifts we can give our loved ones, is to really honor their wishes and send them out in the way under their terms and the way that they wanted to go. Death, of course, when it does occur, is incredibly painful to everybody around that person. But I think there's so much solace to be had in knowing that it was following their wishes in the ways that they wanted. And it makes it more of a, well, we knew this was going to happen and we were prepared and it happened the way that they wanted it, as opposed to everybody's left guessing, scrambling, second guessing. There can be a lot of guilt and shame around that for the surviving family members, if they made the right decisions, if they should have done this, if they shouldn't have done that. And it helps to eliminate the burden off of the family making the decisions, and it helps to empower that family making the decisions to know that they've had this act of love for the last moments of their loved one's life. So I would really encourage you and your loved ones to start thinking about death in that way and start having conversations about death in that way, and coming from this, if you are the one who has to bring it up, perhaps, with an older parent or something, perhaps frame it in that way of, I love you so much that I want to be sure that when this inevitable thing does happen, it's the way that you want it to be, and that there's no regrets, that there's no hard feelings on my end, that I wouldn't want you to feel like I let you down. I love you so much. I want to give you the way out on the way that you want it. It's a beautiful thing. So I hope that encourages you to start this conversation with somebody who needs it. And maybe it's you. Maybe it's time to start to go to the 5 Wishes website and look it up and start just getting some ideas. Nobody's saying you got to sit down and get this all figured out today. But please get those gears turning, because unfortunately, We are all dying every day. The moment we're born, we start dying. We're just on different rates and have different timelines. So please, I implore you to be prepared, have these conversations, and make sure that you can leave your loved ones in the best way possible. Thank you so much for being here with me or listening to the replay if you're catching up afterwards. I hope this was still helpful for you, and I would love to hear your feedback in the comments, or at any time you can shoot me a message. If this is something you feel like you need more personalized help and support with, I can absolutely help you with that. If you can't tell, I'm very passionate about death planning, and I think it's really important for people to have these conversations before these things occur. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.